may be seated. Now, if any of you are starting to perspire out there after a gospel lesson like that, let me remind you that we're still in the First Corinthians series. So you're going to have to wait 3 years before we get back to that text. I'm so sorry. But yes, we are continuing our series on First Corinthians. This series is going to wrap up next week with Pastor Mary Kay. We're actually going to bring it into Ash Wednesday too, but this series has been kind of fun for us to be able to preach on some texts that we typically don't get a chance to preach on, and always illuminating, right? Always illuminating to dig into some scripture that possibly you haven't spent a whole lot of time with. So we've got this, this whole thing started off with Paul kind of writing to them saying, hey, you guys are messing up over there in Corinth. He had already been there, set up the church, and left. And saying, there are those people who are saying, I belong to Paul and I belong to Apollos. That was in chapter 1. And then he kind of just slides away for a little while, refocuses our attention on bringing only Jesus Christ and him crucified, only to now come back to where he first started, because he really didn't come to closure on that. So we get that text again in a different way this time. So he goes, these disagreements that are going on, they're written about. We get snippets of it all throughout the Corinthians text. So while it doesn't lay it out specifically right in the ones we're reading today, we've learned that some of these disagreements are about different people claiming different spiritual gifts and different people claiming to have more wisdom than Paul gives them credit for. And today, he's really direct with them. He calls them little children, right? You can't even, I'm feeding you with milk because you're so spiritually immature, right? So what he's saying is, hey, you guys in all your little quarrels, you're acting like little kids here. You can't be mature in the faith if you're going to be doing that. You're not ready for the solid food of this gospel of Jesus Christ if you're focused on these fleshy things, right? These things of the flesh, these earthly concepts. And so he goes on to kind of read him the riot act a little bit. So in other words, if there's jealousy or quarreling, it's all about who belongs to who, right? Then that is all about earthly things, and you're totally missing out on the mission of Jesus Christ. So he says, Jesus Christ and him crucified. That's what's important, not about who has this gift or who learned this from this person or the other person. He says that that's just a focus on human wisdom. And he gives us a bit of a foretaste there with this imagery of the planting and the watering, right? That the leaders are just the ones who water, who plant the seed, who water the seed, who nurture this great mission that we have, this great ministry, that the leaders are nothing, that it's only Jesus Christ, only God who brings the growth. So it's a very simple message, very easy. He's talking to them in simple terms, and I think about that. These leaders who sometimes get held up so high, I wonder if Paul were to write to us today at Trinity, what Paul would say to us. He says, there are some of you out there who say that you belong to Patrick, or that you belong to Kurt, or that you belong to Brom, or you belong to Sarah, right? Maybe there's some of that still alive and healthy among us, that we take our leaders and instead of just focusing on them as the ones who plant and water, maybe we're looking to them for the growth. But that's what Paul says is it's not them at all. It's not the leaders. It's only God who brings the growth. And so, do we need to be concerned about that? I think there's always a need to be concerned about that. So we need to understand that we all are part of this process, right? It's not just us, Pastor Mary Kay and I, or whoever these new leaders are coming, or whoever those leaders were that were here before. We aren't that important, y'all. You all are. That we're here planting and watering, and it's God who brings the growth. He says it so well in verse 6 and 7. I planted, Apollos water, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Of course, he's speaking metaphorically here, right? But we can take this into real practical terms, too. I was just down in Jamaica with the men's group, and we were building a greenhouse. We met some lovely people in our hotel room, and we'd visit with them each day. A lot of Canadians down there. We're talking to these Canadians, and finally, they'd ask how it was going each day, and the foundation was down, and we're laying block, and this Canadian woman looks at me and says, "Why are you building a greenhouse in Jamaica? Doesn't stuff just grow here?" We come from the northern climates. We know of a greenhouse as a place where you have to plant stuff in those seasons where it's not warm enough to plant outside. She was thinking the same thing. Why a greenhouse? And I said, great question. Let me explain that to you. You see, this greenhouse is more than just a place to grow things. It's a place to teach as well. This is a cooperative ministry between the Jamaican kind of Department of Agriculture and our school down at Jobna. And this cooperative effort is to be a demonstration project. One of how you use recycled bottles and those kinds of things to create a positive outcome. The walls are actually going to be made with recycled bottles, plastic bottles, and then it's going to be used as a way for the children to learn all about growing their own food, right? So the cucumbers and the carrots and those things that are not indigenous to Jamaica that they really want to have as part of their dietary regimen. And so then, not only are they teaching the kids, they're going to have hands-on activities, but then they're going to be eating the food, which will reduce the costs for their lunches, where they serve 85 kids each day for lunch. So it was there's all kinds of aspects to this project. It's not just about doing this silly thing of building a greenhouse in Jamaica. Yes, they can grow anything they want there. But as I was thinking about Paul's teaching, it brought me back to a story. We actually featured this a little bit in one of our confirmation lessons, an incredible prayer that I love by Archbishop Oscar Romero, "A Future Not Our Own." I think this really brings in what Paul was saying about us just kind of planting and watering and waiting for God to bring this growth. It goes like this. It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it's beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything. And there's a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for God's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results. We are prophets of a future not our own. He says it so well that these seeds and these planting and this watering, it may never bloom as long as we're here. It may be sometime in the future. And for some of us, that brings a little bit of tension, a little bit of sadness, because we want to see these results right now. But what Paul is saying, what Oscar Romero is saying, what I think God is saying, that's okay. It's going to come. Trust in that, right? Only God brings the growth. Our job is to just tend the garden, to just do the watering, do the planting, do the trusting that God will bring the growth.